Do you remember the days when dinner was more than just food on the table? When every meal told a story, whether it was the smell of fried chicken wafting through the house after a long day of work, or the comforting warmth of beef stew simmering on the stove? There was a time when working man's dinners were the heartbeat of the family home, a moment of connection, and a way to recharge after a hard day's labor. But somewhere along the way, these hearty, homemade meals slowly faded into history. Today, you'll be hard-pressed to find these classic dishes anywhere. So, what happened to the dinners that once defined family life? Let us take a journey back in time and rediscover 21 working man's dinners that you won't find on dinner tables anymore. Meals that were simple, filling, and full of heart. Let's dive in. 1. Meatloaf. Meatloaf, just the name of it probably brings back memories of a hearty dinner on a busy weekday evening. It was the ultimate working man's meal, made with simple ingredients like ground beef, breadcrumbs, and a few spices, baked together in a loaf pan. It was a filling and comforting dish that could be enjoyed with mashed potatoes and a side of green beans. Meatloaf was not just dinner. It was a reminder that even after a long day, you could still have something hot and home-cooked waiting for you. But in today's fast-paced world, meatloaf has almost disappeared from the family dinner table. With the rise of fast food and frozen dinners, this beloved classic has been pushed aside, and many younger generations have never had the chance to experience its warm, savory goodness. 2. Salisbury steak. Salisbury steak, often seen as a working man's gourmet meal, was a dish that felt like you were eating a restaurant-style dinner without ever leaving the comfort of your home. Ground beef patties, seasoned and smothered in a rich gravy, served with mashed potatoes. This was the kind of meal that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. It was simple but elegant, a satisfying comfort food that could be whipped up in no time. Yet, over the years, Salisbury steak has all but vanished, replaced by fast food burgers or microwave meals. What was once a comforting staple is now nearly impossible to find in many households. 3. Pot roast. Pot roast was a dish that defined Sunday dinners for many working families. The smell of that roast slowly cooking in the oven, filling the house with mouth-watering aromas, was the perfect way to end a long week. It wasn't just about the beef. It was about the vegetables and potatoes that cooked alongside it, soaking up all the flavor from the roast. It was a meal that required patience, but the reward was always worth it. Today, however, pot roast has become a rare treat, overshadowed by quicker, easier meals. Slow cooking isn't as popular as it once was, and in a world where people want meals in minutes, pot roast has faded into the background. 4. Beef stew. Beef stew was the ultimate comfort food, especially when the weather turned cold. Tender chunks of beef, carrots, potatoes, and onions, all simmering together in a rich, savory broth. This was the kind of meal that filled you up and kept you warm from the inside out. It wasn't just about the flavors. It was about the way it brought people together around the dinner table. The slow-cooked, hearty nature of beef stew made it a perfect working man's dinner, easy to make in bulk, and it tasted even better the next day. Unfortunately, with the rise of convenience foods, beef stew has fallen out of favor in many homes, replaced by quicker, less satisfying options. 5. Chicken fried steak. Chicken fried steak was the epitome of Southern comfort food, a tender piece of beef, breaded and fried until golden and crispy, smothered in rich, creamy gravy. It was a dish that could fill you up and put a smile on your face, no matter how hard the day had been. It was the kind of meal you'd expect to find at a roadside diner or your grandmother's house, served with mashed potatoes, corn, and biscuits. Sadly, with today's fast food culture and the growing demand for healthier options, chicken fried steak has become a rarity. the time and effort it takes to make this classic meal from scratch. Just doesn't fit into our modern, busy lives. 6. Shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pie, the perfect comfort food to warm you up after a long day. A savory meat filling, often made with ground beef or lamb, cooked with vegetables like peas, carrots, and onions, all topped with a layer of creamy mashed potatoes. It was the kind of dish that filled the stomach and soul, a reminder of home. Shepherd's pie was both hearty and practical, a one-dish meal that could be made in large batches, ideal for busy families or left overnight. But as time went on, convenience became king, and shepherd's pie faded from many dinner tables. In its place, we see more frozen dinners and microwave options that just don't quite measure up to the warmth of a homemade shepherd's pie. 7. Chopped steak with gravy. Chopped steak with gravy was a simple but satisfying dish. A seasoned ground beef patty, seared and then covered with a rich, savory gravy, served alongside mashed potatoes or rice. It was the kind of meal that made you feel like you were eating a real steak without breaking the bank. Chopped steak was a working man's go-to meal, especially when you needed something quick and easy after a long day. Today, chopped steak has all but disappeared, replaced by burgers and processed meats, but there's something undeniably nostalgic about that tender patty and that comforting gravy. 8. Fried chicken. Fried chicken has always been a symbol of Southern hospitality, and for good reason. Crispy, golden brown on the outside, tender and juicy on the inside, there was nothing quite like a plate of homemade fried chicken. It was a meal that could feed a crowd, and it was the star of many Sunday family gatherings. For decades, fried chicken was a symbol of a hearty, homemade meal made with love. But as fast food chains and convenience meals grew in popularity, fried chicken has become something of a rarity in many homes, often replaced by takeout or frozen chicken nuggets. 9. Baked ziti. Baked ziti, a dish that combined the heartiness of pasta with the comforting flavors of cheese, marinara sauce, and ground beef or sausage. It was a meal that came together easily, especially on busy nights when you needed something filling but didn't have much time. The bubbling cheese and sauce, the savory meat mixed in it, was the kind of meal that fed a family with little effort and left everyone feeling full and satisfied. But over time, baked ziti has been swapped for faster, more convenient options like frozen pizza or takeout. As the trend for homemade pasta dishes faded, baked ziti fell out of the regular dinner rotation. 10. Beef and rice casserole. Beef and rice casserole was a budget-friendly favorite for working families. Ground beef, rice, and a creamy sauce, all baked together in a casserole dish. It was the kind of meal that could stretch a pound of meat to feed a whole family, making it both affordable and filling. Plus, it was a great way to use up whatever ingredients you had left in the pantry. But as the demand for quick meals increased and convenience foods took over, beef and rice casserole became another casualty of the fast food revolution. Today, it's a dish that many have forgotten about, replaced by faster meals that don't require the same time and care. 11. Tuna casserole. Tuna casserole, a staple on many dinner tables, was the epitome of comfort food for working families. It was quick, affordable, and filling: a can of tuna, some noodles, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a sprinkle of breadcrumbs, all baked into a warm, gooey casserole. It was the kind of dish that could be put together in a pinch, and it always tasted like home. For years, tuna casserole was a reliable dinner, especially when times were tight. But today, the convenience of prepared meals and takeout has pushed this nostalgic favorite aside. Now, it's nearly impossible to find a tuna casserole on the dinner table, replaced by other quick, processed options. 12. Meatball subs. Meatball subs, who could forget them? A delicious sub roll stuffed with tender, juicy meatballs, smothered in marinara sauce, and topped with gooey melted cheese. It was the kind of meal that brought a little extra joy to lunch or dinner, especially after a long day. You'd grab one from your local diner, or make it at home with a few ingredients, and you were set. Meatball subs were a quick, satisfying way to fill up, but like many other diner staples, they've been replaced by quicker, more convenient meals, like pre-made sandwiches and fast food. It's a dish that you rarely see these days, as life moves faster and time to sit down for a hearty meal has become a luxury. 13. Ham and beans. Ham and beans. A humble yet hearty meal that could be made with just a few simple ingredients. It was the kind of dish that used up leftover ham and paired it with slow-cooked beans, creating a meal that was both filling and satisfying, often served with cornbread or biscuits. Ham and beans were a go-to meal for working men who needed something hearty and affordable. The beauty of this dish was its simplicity, and how it could be stretched to feed a large family. Unfortunately, the slow-cooked comfort of ham and beans has fallen out of favor in the rush of modern life, replaced by quicker, less satisfying meals. 14. Beef stroganoff. Beef stroganoff was once considered a sophisticated yet simple dinner for working families. Tender strips of beef, cooked in a creamy, rich sauce made from sour cream, mustard, and beef broth, served over egg noodles. This was the kind of meal that felt both luxurious and comforting at the same time. It was a go-to dish for busy weeknights, when you wanted something that felt special but didn't require too much time or effort. However, in today's world of fast food and prepackaged meals, beef stroganoff has fallen off the dinner table for many families, replaced by simpler and less time-consuming options. 15. Chili was the perfect working man's dinner. Hearty, spicy, and packed with protein, chili could feed a crowd and keep everyone full for hours. Ground beef, beans, tomatoes, and spices simmered together to create a thick, flavorful stew that warmed you up from the inside out. It was a go-to meal for cold weather, and it was often made in large batches, so there was always enough to go around. Chili could be served with cornbread, crackers, or a dollop of sour cream, and was often a family favorite. But like so many other comfort foods, chili has been replaced by quicker, more convenient options. It's one of those meals that takes time to perfect, and in today's world of microwave dinners, that's something many families just don't have. 16. Country fried steak with gravy. Country fried steak with gravy. What could be more satisfying than that? A tender, breaded and fried steak, smothered in rich, creamy gravy, served with mashed potatoes or a side of vegetables. This meal was an instant classic for working families, offering comfort and heartiness with every bite. It wasn't just a meal, it was an experience, a crispy, flavorful steak topped with the indulgent gravy that made everything taste just right. Today, it's a rare find, as more people opt for faster meals or prepackaged options, and the love for traditional home-cooked meals like country fried steak fades away. 17. Sloppy Joes. Sloppy Joes were the go-to meal for busy nights when you wanted something quick but hearty. Ground beef cooked with onions, peppers, and a tangy sauce, served on a soft hamburger bun. It was a dish that didn't need any frills, just delicious, comforting flavor that made you feel like a kid again. The beauty of Sloppy Joes was how easy it was to make in large batches, feeding a family without breaking the bank. But as the world shifted toward fast food and convenience foods, Sloppy Joes fell out of favor, and many families no longer turn to this quick, nostalgic favorite for dinner. 18. Stuffed peppers. Stuffed peppers, colorful, hearty, and packed with flavor. Ground beef, rice, and tomatoes all stuffed inside a tender bell pepper, baked to perfection with a sprinkle of cheese on top. It was the kind of meal that made you feel good about eating your vegetables, with all the flavors you loved wrapped in a neat, comforting package. Stuffed peppers were versatile, too. You could change up the stuffing based on what you had on hand, making it a flexible and affordable option. But as the demand for quicker, less involved meals has risen, stuffed peppers have been left behind, replaced by processed foods that don't require any thought or preparation. 19. Meat and potato skillet. Meat and potato skillet dinners were as simple as they were satisfying. Ground beef or sausage, browned and cooked with potatoes, onions, and bell peppers, all combined into one hearty skillet meal. It was filling, easy to make, and could be customized with whatever you had in the fridge. Whether it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the meat and potato skillet was a reliable go-to for working men who needed a hot meal after a long day. Today, though, it's become harder to find people making this hearty, homey dish, as we turn to faster alternatives that just don't hit the same mark. 20. Chicken and dumplings. Chicken and dumplings. Nothing quite compares to the warmth of a big bowl of this classic dish. Tender chicken, vegetables, and a creamy broth, with soft, pillowy dumplings floating on top. It was a meal that felt like a hug from the inside out, offering comfort on a cold day or after a tiring shift at work. Chicken and dumplings were often made in large batches, allowing families to stretch a meal and enjoy the leftovers the next day. Sadly, this dish has been replaced by more processed options that don't have the same soul-satisfying effect. The labor of love it took to make from scratch has become a thing of the past, and chicken and dumplings is a rarity in today's fast food world. 21. Roast beef and mashed potatoes. Roast beef and mashed potatoes was the kind of meal that was often reserved for Sunday dinners or special family gatherings. The roast, perfectly seasoned and slow-cooked until tender, was paired with smooth, buttery mashed potatoes that absorbed all the delicious gravy. A meal like this was meant to fill you up and keep you going through the week. It wasn't just a dinner, it was a tradition. Yet, as time has gone on and people have become busier, the ritual of roasting a beef and making fresh mashed potatoes has been replaced by faster, less time-consuming options. The slow-cooked roast has become a rarity, and the simple joy of enjoying this classic meal is fading into the past. 22. Pot roast. Pot roast is the perfect example of a meal that says, "I care about you." The slow-cooked beef, tender from hours of simmering, surrounded by carrots, potatoes, and onions, all cooked together in a flavorful broth. Pot roast was the ultimate comfort food, the kind of dish that made the house smell amazing for hours before it was even ready. It was a meal that brought families together around the table. But with the rise of fast food and convenience meals, the slow and steady pace of making a pot roast has been replaced. People now opt for quicker meals that can be on the table in under 30 minutes, leaving pot roast to the history books of family dinners. 23. Tater tot casserole. Tater tot casserole was the quintessential dish of the working man's dinner. A layer of seasoned ground beef or turkey, covered with a creamy mushroom soup mixture and topped with crispy tater tots. This casserole was easy to prepare, affordable, and oh so filling. It was the type of meal that could be made in a large pan, fed a crowd, and often became the center of dinner conversations. Tater tot casserole had a homey, nostalgic feel, but with the rise of healthier eating and the decline of processed foods, this once beloved meal is hardly seen today. People are opting for lighter, less processed alternatives, and tater tot casserole has been left behind. Asterisk, it's funny how food isn't just about feeding our bodies. It feeds our memories, too. These dinners weren't just meals, they were moments. They were the smell of something slow cooking on the stove, after a long day, the clatter of plates as families gathered around the table, the quiet comfort of knowing there'd be enough to go around. Today, life moves faster. We don't always have time to slow down and cook like we used to. But maybe after watching this, you'll remember one of these old favorites and bring it back to your table, even if just for one night. Because sometimes, a simple meal can take us back to the best parts of our past. Which one of these dishes do you remember the most? Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because we've got plenty more memories where that came from.